Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. To start with the greatest name of Almighty Allah, who is the creator of the universe, who runs the rivers, lakes, and clouds full of rain. It's my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to all of you in this beautiful gathering. It's great to see you all here. Thank you for coming. Let me introduce myself. My name is Farwa Afzal. I am a student and I am doing Masters in TEFL, that is Teaching of English as a Foreign Language. It's really nice to be here to briefly talk about today's topic that I've given is generation gap. I've segmented my presentation into 4 parts. In the first part, I'll explain what is generation gap. In the second part, I'll tell you when do we feel generation gap the most. In the third part, I'll describe what are the causes of generation gap. In the last part, I'll conclude my presentation with some suggestions that how can generation gap be reduced. So let's start my presentation. Generation gap has always been a matter of concern in all the societies. Today, it is debatable whether or not generation gap has increased recently. I personally believe that generation gap and the difference between the old people and the young one has been raised to a great extent. So, generation gap is the difference in the thought process of how people think and how they perceive things. So, there might be a generation gap between a parent and child, between one generation and the other generation, between young and the old one, and even between 2 friends. I remember here that my grandfather often says that things were quite different when we were young, and today's generation is beyond my comprehension. I acknowledge him and tell him that change is inevitable, and with the passage of time, the thinking of a person changes. So I can see that my generation is quite different to my eldest generation in various ways. Now I'll explain the causes of generation gap. These days, youngest have more audacity as compared to the past, and consequently they break the taboos and customs easily. The temerity of the new generation is not tolerable for the previous one because all have many strict ideas about lifestyle. Moreover, in the recent comparative era, the young blood has to break out of its comfort zone. Furthermore, technology is progressing by leaps and bounds in the world. Today, there are many equipments and software programs which were beyond the imagination of our previous generation in the past. Another reason of generation gap is that the elders are more critical of the younger generation, and the youngs mostly tend to ignore the grumbling and mumbling of the previous one. So all these reasons bring about a wider gap between these 2 generations. I want to add a quote of Margaret Wilson, who says that, I suppose every generation has a conceit of itself which elevates it in its opinion above that which comes later. So, for the betterment of our society, there are a lot of things that we have to do, and one thing is most important, and that how can generation gap be reduced? So there are many ways, and there are a lot of steps that we can follow to reduce this gap. For example, the first one is that we need to understand. We need to understand that there are 2 types of individuals, and they can think in any way they want. And the second one is that we need communication. We have to communicate with others. A lot of communication with commitment is required because communication is the best tool to resolve issues. And the third one is that much time should be spent together. Family decisions should be taken after consulting from each member of the family. And the last one is that people should know that respect is a two-way process. If someone wants respect, one has to show respect too. So at the end of my presentation, I want to say that generation gap is nothing. It's just a difference in the way of thinking. If people start to believe in their family, this gap will itself diminish. So I request to all of you that take a step forward and try to bridge this widening gap. Thank you.